Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for watching, anyone who's watching. Tonight we are going to talk about the popular laugh track sitcoms of Friends, mostly Friends and The Big Bang Theory, but we'll also talk about How I Met Your Mother and Two and a Half Men, and we'll be talking about how these shows have affected the society of the time, how these shows, the character archetypes these shows involve, what these shows teach us about love and romance, and all four of these TV shows are kind of quite similar in some ways, Lyndsey, in the respect that they kind of all have the same archetypes and the same sort of characters that star in the show. What do you think about that? Like, what sort of archetypes do you think that all four of these shows have?
I would agree. I definitely see so many similar characters. I mean, let's start with the Joey character. I mean, if we go back to Joey being the original player, the one that, thought he was God's gift to women, he set that in stone for everybody. But you've got then the likes of Barney in How I Met Your Mother, you've got Charlie in Two and a Half Men, and you've got Hard Wolowitz thinking he is. He doesn't really be, but out of the group, he's the one that thinks he's the player. And it's the same with all of those shows. There's always that one player. Then you have the one who's the incredibly annoying one. And let's face it, I don't know about you, but I have to say that my most annoying character in Friends is Ross. He definitely just drives me insane, but there's always that one that irritates you. So you're going from that to Two and a Half Men, you've got Alan. In How I Met Your Mother, it's Ted Moseby. I mean, I don't care that he is everything of How I Met Your Mother. It is literally a show about him. He is so annoying. But yeah, I mean, those are just two of them. You've also got the materialistic one, Rachel, Penny. They're the same sort of people, just regurgitated in different shows. But some of these shows have actually become so amazing in their own right. But in my opinion, it kind of stems from Friends, although people older than me will say that it came from, I can't even remember what it was. That's exactly it, Seinfeld. Yeah, so Seinfeld is the OG, but Friends is the one that everybody remembers.
Let's talk about the kind of player character first of all, because that's the first one you brought up. There is definitely an amount to which all of these shows have the kind of the lovable misogynist, basically, the kind of the character that is not respectful at all towards women, but for some reason kind of gets away with it, like he's kind of a protagonistic character. So Joey, you can't help but love. Barney is probably my favorite character in How I Met Your Mother. I think he's a lot of people's favorite character. Charlie, you can't help but love, even though he's a terrible woman. And Hard Wolowitz, I actually like Hard Wolowitz, I have to be honest, I really do. So you have that lovable, I don't want to call it lovable misogyny, it's not quite that, but it almost is.
Lovable rogue.
Lovable rogue, yes.
That's a nicer way to put it.
Yes, but there's something about that both men and women really love, though, in our staple. What do you think about that?
Well, you see, there is an argument against that now that the likes of Friends is showing again on Netflix. A lot of teenagers don't like it and don't get it because they're kind of moving away from enjoying that sort of humor. It doesn't stand up to them. Whereas the likes of us, we grew up with that. It was hilarious. So we enjoy even the Howard character in The Big Bang Theory, whereas a lot of people will think he's awful. But because we came from an era of Joey, we think he's brilliant because he is that lovable rogue. So I think it is kind of a split one because I do love that sort of, they have a heart of gold, but they don't really show it whenever they are being a player. And so many girlfriends, because he'd finally had his own heart broken. And I think whenever you humanize them as well and see that heart of them, it kind of makes it easier to have that lovable rogue because there has to be I think with Charlie, as much as we love him in Two and a Half Men, he is a jerk, you know.
Yeah,
But again, they did the whole thing where he had his heart broken too, because you have to humanize the character as well, because otherwise, what is there to enjoy about them? So I
yes.
think if you have that element of them being a nice person too, it makes it different.
Yes, the lovable rogue it's something to which you can't help but admire them. I think the Howard Wallace character in Big Bang, I always found to be a little ironic because I kind of what I kind of hung around with characters like that. You know, people who thought they were kind of God's gift to women, but kind of weren't.
Yeah.
And I think that any man has, and I think that most women know somebody like that. So Howard Wallace I loved because Howard Wallace was totally dynamic whenever I was growing up as a kid, and I knew plenty of people like that who were kind of all
Yeah.
talk when it came to women, but kind of no action or whatever.
I actually think you hit on something perfect there, just interrupting. I think with all the characters, that's one of the things that works so well, because you can look at them and go, oh yeah, that's so like such and such. And I think that's where all those quizzes come from. Are you a Monica? Are you a Rachel? Are you a Ross? Or are you a Joey? Because you can see, you look at your friends and you just go, yeah, that is so them. And when they are doing things in the episode, you're like, yeah, I could see Lynn doing something as crazy as Monica's doing, or, things like that. Sorry, Lynn, throwing you under the bus there. But I think that's one of the beauties of it. And it's why we love it so much, because they do remind us of people in our real lives. And you are right. There is so many people that you could look back on and see, yeah, they're the wannabe player. They think they are. I think that's the thing that I love the most about Howard, is that he wasn't a real player. He just wanted to be there with the big boys doing it, but he didn't really stand up.
Charlie and Barney are certainly the lovable rogue characters, and you can see why women are kind of endeared towards them, for much the same reason that men are endeared towards them. They're kind of confident, they kind of have their not strong opinions, but kind of strong worldview of world. They're kind of confident in their assertion of the worldview that they hold. They, they are successful, which is something that everybody admires and respects. For Barney and Charlie, anyway, not so much for Joey, but these sort of archetypes of that sort of confidence, which earned in some ways and respects with Barney and Charlie. The annoying one, I think that we've kind of covered the player one.
Yeah, definitely.
Ted Moseby and Ross are very similar and very annoying for the same reason. I was thinking about this last night whenever I was watching How I Met Your Mother. Ted Moseby goes on an awful lot about how he wants to find the one, etc., etc., etc. Firstly, it's repetitive, and secondly, it sort of until such times as you can find happiness in yourself, you're kind of not ready for the one. And throughout the season, he was not happy in himself, and it's something that I saw. Certainly, Ross became less confident as the season went on, and Ted Moseby especially kept, Barney wanted to go out, Barney wanted to have a good time, and Barney wanted to. But Ted Moseby was like an anchor to him. And it's like, stop being such an anchor. Stop, be young, enjoy your life, and Miss Right will come along whenever you kind of feel as if you have your stuff together. But being the sort of character that moans about not having your stuff together is precisely the sort of character that doesn't have their stuff together, And what's weird is that I remember a few of my mates being like that whenever I was single. Anytime that I wanted to go out, they were always like, "Oh no, I just want to go to a quiet bar where there's absolutely nobody," or "I just want to stay at this party where no fun is being had." And yeah, yeah. What are your thoughts on this?
I would definitely agree with you, 100%. I think I think it's something that in this decade that we are sort of learning more is about loving yourself before anybody else. I mean, I suppose you could say it's actually been a few decades, but You know, a long time ago, people thought you grew up, you got married, and that was just it. It didn't really matter who you were marrying, just marry your childhood sweetheart and go on with it. Whereas now, more people are focusing on themselves before actually thinking about anything else. Who are you? Who are you as a person? What do you want out of life? What do you want out of a relationship, a marriage, a whole lifespan? Before you sit down and think about, well, is this person the right person for me? How am I going to find that right person? And to be honest, for most people, it's just a happy accident. I mean, most people I know, it, I mean, I suppose that, again, it is different now with the all the online dating stuff. But I think you're right that he is so annoying because he's just focusing on, I need to find this love. If I find this love, then everything will fall into place for me, and my life will be complete. When in actual fact, when you fall in love, your whole life is turned upside down and you start learning everything all over again. So I think you need to know who you are as a person, because it's very easy to lose yourself when you're trying to find someone. But that was one of the things that really annoyed me about the show, was that I mean, don't get me wrong, the whole premise is how I met your mother. So it's all about how he fell in love and how that happened. But it was so needy. You know, he was just such a broken person. And I would have liked to have seen him mature as a person. As we discussed, you know, with Joey, with other people, they did grow. They developed as people as the time went on. And I never felt that with Ted Moseby. I just felt like he was the same needy, selfish person from start to finish.
Yeah, if anything, like he was the most depressed in the eighth season, which is maybe why. So it has like a terrible moral to the whole story, which is kind of be as depressed as you can be, and then suddenly you'll be whatever to find the love of your life. Whereas the moral of that story should have been, you know, I don't know, the complete opposite. Like, yes, I had a few long
Love
term
yourself,
relationships.
be happy.
Hmm. So it seemed like by the time that that season was over, the moral of the story was terrible. But the show was actually really good. It just sort of Ted Mosby definitely anchored it down. I would have loved to have seen him, you know, enjoy his life a little more. You know, maybe have a few romances along the way, maybe learn important lessons along the way. But it just got repetitive that he was an anchor to Barney. Like Barney wanted to go out, and I'm a single guy. I want to go out. You know, so that person annoys me. You know, that person that doesn't live their lives. And the idea of the one is something that sitcoms force down our throats a little bit, because it's been my experience anyway that when it comes to love, very often you meet somebody, there's attraction, yes, you get along well, that's great. Um, Perhaps you fall in love, I don't know, but basically you work really, really hard at whatever you have with the person that you have it with. So the idea that fate brings you together is it's something that sort of sitcoms seem to force down our throats a lot, and I'm not sure I agree with it. I think love is hard work, marriage is hard work, and definitely as How I Met Your Mother went along, and Ted Mosby seemed to believe in faith a lot. You know,
Yeah, I definitely agree. They do ram the whole fate thing down your throat a lot in these sitcoms, and I don't agree with it. I 100% am of the opinion that yes, there is, to a certain degree, a such person as the right person. But one thing that's always stuck in my head, I mean, this year I'm married 10 years. We've been together 16. Didn't get this far without learning a thing or two. But one thing that stuck with me actually from our wedding is what our officiant said. And what she said, it's not about finding the right person, but being the right person. And that really struck me because yes, it's all well and good meeting somebody that you're really attracted to and on paper are the right person, but that doesn't mean that they are that right person. You have to be the right person for yourself. And as you change, you've got to remember to work together, to grow together, rather than it just being, yeah, We met, we're in love, we're happy, that's it, happily ever after.
Happily ever after,
It's
three
not real.
words which have pretty much ruined like a lot of marriages. Because a lot of marriages, people think once you have a ring on your finger, that's it, the work's over. That's whenever the work starts, and you think, yeah, how much work. I mean, not that I know, I'm not married, never have been. I was engaged briefly for 3 months, but as soon as I put a ring on her finger, that's when the work started. And it got very hard very quickly. Um,
Yeah.
we were together for about 3 months. Got engaged after about 1 month. And after we got engaged, the whole relationship went crap. Uh,
Wow,
yeah,
that's fast though.
it is fast. It is
That's
fast.
something I'm going to talk to you about that offline.
Yeah, no, it is fast, and I'm not saying that. I'm not recommending that anyone else do that. But I think that part of the reason why I did do that was because I've been had all these sitcoms telling me that I'd found the one, etc., etc., and it was a terrible mistake, and I would not recommend it to anyone. Um,
Can I ask what age you were?
30-ish.
Right. And that right there is the answer. Because you've watched all these shows and everything that have told you by this age, you should be married. So when you were in that relationship, you thought, right, I need to lock this down. I need to do this because I'm this age. And if I don't do it now, it's never going to happen. And even if you don't actually consciously think that, it's there in the back of your head that you have to get married before a certain age. Otherwise, it's weird. My husband was 39 when we got married. He was 33 when we met. It doesn't matter what age you are.
Yeah. There is something
But
in our
that is
culture
what they drill into us.
that sort of says that 30 is the cutoff or something. More so for women than men, but
Yeah.
that life ends at 30 or something. And let me tell you, life does not end at 30 at all. Life only begins at 30. Like anything before 30, nowadays you're basically a kid, maybe 27, but yeah, nowadays you're basically a child up until 27. That used to be 18, but no, it's not anymore.
No. I definitely think I felt older in my late teens than I did in my early to mid 20s. It wasn't until I was in my late 20s that I actually felt like an adult. When I was in my early 20s, I felt like some sort of kid playing house. And at the end of the day, should be going home to mommy and daddy. I shouldn't have been out looking after myself and being responsible for anyone, never mind having a house and, whatever. I definitely think it's only really in your late 20s that you start becoming an actual adult. So this whole thing about being married before 30 is not necessarily for everybody. Yes, if it works. I mean, I was 26, but it doesn't. I mean, who I am now at 36 is not who I was at 26. I've changed so much in 10 years, and everybody is so different as you get older, and just because you want something when you are younger doesn't mean to say it's the same in later years. So sometimes you do have to. I mean, Thomas and I were together 6 years before we get married. We did not rush into it.
Yeah.
But
there's an interesting thing. I don't want to do a racism here or whatever, but the character that really annoys me on The Big Bang Theory is Raj.
Yeah, well, that's what I put on that on that file that I sent you. Yeah, Raj would be the annoying one for me, and it's the same thing, Patrick. It's that whole needy character who needs to find love, who doesn't want to be on his own, and I think that is the problem. Whenever we have these shows, there's always that one. It's the same in how in 2.5 Men, you have Alan who doesn't want to be on his own and will just go out with whoever comes his way. Like, come on, he married Candy because she showed an interest in him. But with Raj, I definitely think he was that character that I honestly, if they took Raj out, I'd be okay with that.
Yeah.
If they had episodes without him in it, it wouldn't bother me.
He does moan a lot about, I'm so lonely, and they already have a character as well. They have two characters like that. They have Stewart and they have Raj. That's one too many sad sacks for one TV show. So either have one or the other. Either one's fine, because I actually quite like both of them. But for me, it would be
I'm trying
one.
to think, when did Stewart come into the Big Bang Theory?
He was kind of
It was
always
in the
around.
later,
Yeah,
but
he was in the
he
later
wasn't a
seasons.
main character.
He was a background character for the first 2 or 3 seasons, or first 1 or 2
Yeah.
seasons, and then he came in, and I think it was like the fifth season. He was like a main character,
Hmm.
and then he was living with Howard and Bernadette for a long time.
Yeah.
Uh, um,
I kind of think you could have switched them. Like Raj could have gone back to India and just had Stewart, because I really bought him as the needy character and the sad sack that everything that's the thing about Stewart. This is why I like Stewart as the needy character better, because his life was crap. Everything that could go wrong went wrong, and let's face it, he all those things that were wrong with him physically. Whereas Raj came from a very, very wealthy family. He had everything handed to him. He lived in a fancy apartment. He had cleaners coming in,
Not only that,
and
but the
yet,
actor is quite handsome. Like the handsome actor that
oh, he's
plays Raj
gorgeous.
yeah, so I don't buy him as the sad sack character that's finding it hard to get a woman.
No.
Whereas Stuart's, at least the way in which the makeup is done with
Yeah.
Stewart, etc., I can buy him as being
Mhm.
the sad sack because he looked like the sad sack.
Yeah.
But like compounding that sad sadness with this very reasonably handsome actor, it's just it was a little too much with Raj.
I think they could have toned it down a wee bit in the later episodes. I think that's what they should have done, especially when they brought Stewart in more as a more prominent character. The whole thing whenever Howard and Bernadette were having their babies and the two of them were battling against each other, it got really annoying for me. That whole neediness of two characters. I think they could have just had one and let him grow as a person.
Yeah, because Raj had so much going on. Like Raj had a good job, he was getting the accolades in his career, he was reasonably handsome, so I just find it hard to buy that he wasn't getting a girl. So giving him a girlfriend even, and letting him move on and letting him grow and develop or give him a hobby or an interest. And that was what was interesting. Something that I noticed now that I'm on a weight loss plan about the Big Bang Theory and quite a lot of these shows is that nobody's following any sort of gym regimen or healthy eating plan. They're all eating takeouts every night, and it's like, if I was doing that, I would not be the way I am.
Yeah, my husband says that to me all the time. He's like, how can they eat all that takeaway and not end up overweight? But if you look at the difference, I don't know if you've ever been to America, but their Chinese food is not the same as what we eat. They don't have, those stodgy sauce-based meals that we eat here. That's not what they eat in America. I remember the first time I went to Chinese over there and I was like, what the heck? But yeah, obviously Chineses over there are very different. So they eat more noodle-based things and less sauce-based, and they probably don't have the same sort of additives in the sauces that we have. So if we ate our Chinese every night, yes, that's one thing. But if we ate their kind of food every night, maybe it wouldn't be so bad. Plus, they probably don't eat as much crap the rest of the time either.
In New York, it's quite uncommon to have a kitchen in New York, or because rental space is at such a premium in New York that a lot, something like 50% of New York City residents don't even have a kitchen, and most people live in like a bedsit. Which I suppose we can tie back into Friends by saying, look at the size of their apartment, which is something that a lot of people have commented on. But the vast majority of New Yorkers wouldn't have a kitchen. So that's why they eat out all the time. I'm not sure what it's like in Pasadena, but I know that in New York, it would be like that.
I think it's very similar there. And again, you've got the whole thing with the apartments. Let's actually talk about that for a second, because I think it's amazing that the likes of Joey could afford the apartment that he lived in, considering how often was he without a job. And if we cross that over into the Big Bang Theory, there's episodes where Sheldon talks about how if he could afford to pay the rent on his own, he wouldn't have a roommate. Yes, their apartment is bigger, but on that premise alone, how does Penny afford their apartment ever working in the Cheesecake Factory? Because both of us haven't been to America and know how little waitresses get paid in restaurants. There's no way she would have been able to afford that apartment.
Yeah,
not a
I think that's just suspend your disbelief kind of ones and enjoy the show. But it's definitely a good point. Um, what's even more interesting is that Penny and Leonard and Sheldon are physicists, presumably earning a reasonably good salary, and they still have the house share.
Yeah.
As well. That's
I think you might find, though, that might be more common for people because things are more expensive over there. So rather than waste all their money on just rent, they share with someone until such times as they meet someone and fall in love and live with them. They might as well just share the rent and save a bit of money. Could be that, but I do think I honestly don't buy Sheldon as the type of person to have a roommate. Surely he could have had Penny's apartment, a smaller apartment that had one bedroom and had enough space for everything that he needs and not needed a roommate. I don't buy his character as someone who needed a roommate.
Yeah, that's a good point. Someone like Sheldon would pay the extra money to have their own apartment, especially if it just across the hall. Whereas I can totally buy Howard and Raj living together.
100%.
Leonard having a roommate, absolutely, I can buy that. But yeah, you're right. He's too kind of OCD and fastidious to kind of. A character like that would definitely have some place, and even if it was an extra $200 a month or whatever, or $300, yeah, he would definitely have some place.
Yeah, and he does say in an episode, I think, when Penny's borrowing money from him, he says that his bills and everything attribute to like 40% of his income. So surely that would mean that he could afford that all by himself, because he has got all that money sitting around that he does not use and just keeps accumulating. In fact, I think there's one episode where they bring out checks from the university that he hasn't even cashed either. So yeah, I definitely think Sheldon is a character that should have lived on his own because he liked everything just so, doesn't like company, likes everything his way. I think that's one thing that could have been different about the show.
Yeah, you could put like Raj and Leonard in the apartment and kind of have him across the hall or whatever. And you could have bought that, definitely. Or had a kind of like a trifecta, like in this apartment complex, there's sort of 3 apartments in a triangle, like that. You know what I mean? So you have Sheldon in one of the apartments, Penny in the other one, and Raj and that might have endeared us more Raj.
Well, if you cross that over to Friends, you've got Phoebe you've got Monica and Rachel in one apartment. So say they are Leonard and Raj, for example, and across the hall you have Sheldon on his own, and then sure nearby you have Howard. You could have that, the way Ross moved into that apartment just across the way, which is another thing that drives me insane, how they can see that apartment from their window. But we'll get to that. But yeah, you could have that sort of thing where they all live in close proximity and meet up close by or in each other's apartments. But I think then we are literally copycatting. So
yeah. Moving on to we could talk about relationships, Ross and Rachel versus Penny and Leonard. I think we both have thoughts on this. Ross and Rachel, I hated Ross and Rachel. Maybe they just started to bore me. I don't know. But after all the years of, will they, won't they, I stopped caring and I stopped liking both of them, was my overwhelming opinion on Ross and Rachel. I know that like our culture remembers that as being kind of the big will they, won't they in sitcoms. But for me, it was big I don't care of sitcoms. Let's move on. Either do or don't, and let's do something else.
So I 100% agree.
It wasn't satisfying for me whenever they actually finally got together. It wasn't anything for me.
I didn't buy them getting together in the end. That's one of the things for me. I didn't buy that. Yes, he loved her from they were teenagers, but it wasn't love. It was lust for an attractive girl because she wasn't a nice person. What was there to love? And even whenever she came along, she was still that vapid, empty person that was shallow, materialistic, and all about herself. Yes, obviously, like everybody, her character did develop and she matured and everything, but I kind of felt like they could have met better people. Ross and Emily, I bought them as a couple and thought,
I thought them.
yeah, do you know what? This is brilliant. I love the idea of them.
I hated the jealousy. I hated Rachel's jealousy. It's like, go away. A similar thing about how Ted and Ron. That's a complete spoiler for How I Met Your Mother, but I did not buy them as a couple at all. In the early seasons, okay, I saw her as a romance. It's like, yes, that's the sort of girlfriend you have in your early 20s. But Ted and Robin, exactly the same way. It's like they ended up at the end, and it's like, no, I'm not buying this. And I think everybody said that about the last episode of How I Met Your Mother was just, why? We were all over that. We all moved on. We'd all fallen in love with Tracy. We'd all kind of. The last season wasn't a great season of How I Met Your Mother, but it was fine. For those of us who stuck in there, it was. We did want to watch it, and we did want to see them get together. And basically, the last 20 seconds of How I Met Your Mother should definitely have been removed because everybody was over Ed and Robin. They were good friends, and I totally bought them as friends. I loved them as friends. I love the Robin character. I don't love the Ted character, but yeah. But I was over them as a couple, and
and I think also I didn't buy her and Barney getting married.
Yeah,
what on earth is that about? Yeah, very much so. And for then Ted to turn around and go back with her after his best friend was married to her. I don't know about you, but that there's something really wrong about that if you end up marrying somebody that your best friend has been married to. None of that rung true to me. It kind of, I don't know about you in this, but I kind of felt like they never knew where they were going with the end of the show, and they kind of just winged it at the end.
It's sort of how do you wrap up the Barney character, though? Barney was such a tour de force as a character. Yes, you kind of want them to settle down and you kind of want them to find some sort of purpose. So I think they kind of tried to make him get married and they weren't happy with that. So then they finally gave him a kid and that gave him a purpose, whatever. But I didn't really buy that for Barney either. Yes, getting him a girlfriend. I don't know how to wrap up the Barney character. I like what happened with his job. I think that was good.
Yeah.
He was supergrass for his job. And he kind of grassed up his employer. I like that.
Yeah. I didn't even remember that he had a kid. That's how much that stuck in my head.
It was in the last episode. It was a kind of an afterthought in the last episode that he had a kid. And that's
again, I kind of felt like the whole of the end season was just crap. What are we going to do now? We need to get all of this wrapped up and have an end. And I think they just went, yeah, he has a kid. Them two end up together and this happens. And
the end of 2.5 Men happened then with the death of Charlie and stuff. What do you think about him and Rose getting together?
Again, I didn't buy it. She was a crazy freaking stalker.
Yeah.
Who gets together with somebody that staples their balls to their leg?
Exactly. I was exactly
that would have me terrified for coming home late, for, doing something wrong. If that's what she did before we got together, what's she going to do while we're married if I do something wrong? Is she going to chop it off altogether? She was just too crazy. And I loved her character because I thought it was brilliant having that crazy person that just did whatever she wanted. Like the fact that you would just turn around and just sitting in their house. Whereas I didn't buy them getting together.
No.
I actually kind of liked whenever she left.
Yes. There was something sort of lovable about her being kind of the girl who crawled over the gate and kind of talked and there was something very lovable about her in the first couple of seasons. Yeah. And then that evolved, that she became kind of a main character, and yeah, I just didn't buy it, and yeah, that was obviously there was off-screen stuff happening, which I don't really want to talk about the off-screen stuff because I don't really think it's relevant to the conversation. I mean, we can talk about it if you want, but I don't think it's relevant to this conversation, the off-screen stuff. No. But yeah, it was an unsatisfactory end to the show, and as much as it continued after. I didn't watch it afterwards, really. I just checked in.
You missed nothing. It was crap.
Yeah.
It really was crap. So we'll
The
move
Alan
on from
character,
that.
yeah, the Alan character became particularly annoying after that because he had no reason to be there anymore, and
No.
know,
That drove me
like,
insane. Every episode I complained about that. My husband actually said, Lyndsey, can you please stop watching this with me? Because every single time you complain, why does he still live with him? Why is he still there? Why is he looking after his kid? Doesn't make sense.
You don't need a 50-year-old man living with you who is just annoying as a kid. You don't need that. I mean, there's no reason for that to happen at all. So anyway, so we're going to call it the end of 2.5 Men was whenever Charlie died, and that was obviously unsatisfactory.
Yeah, that's the end. But going back to the relationships before we move on from that fully, do you buy Penny and Leonard as a long-lasting couple?
I do. I love Penny and Leonard. I think they weren't as funny after they kind of got married, but I do. That's what I love Penny and Leonard as a couple in our mainstream culture because they bring so much to each other. I can totally see what it is they bring to each other. And I think it was Stewart that said in one of the episodes, Leonard makes you think about the world more deeply. And, well, for Leonard, it's just sort of, you're very pretty and beautiful. And I definitely buy them as a couple. What about you?
It's a funny one because I love their relationship as it progressed, but I don't think it would have in real life. I don't think it would have lasted for the simple reason their sex life was average, below average for the most part. She says it repeatedly, even after they're married. She says, "Nah, it was okay. You didn't rock my world." She makes comment on it so often, so it obviously didn't get any better. And Penny has been with so many people that is clearly something that was a big deal for her. In my opinion, Penny as a person, being the bubbly, outgoing person that she was, and how many different men she had repeatedly, would have moved on and been with someone else quite quickly because she would have got bored very fast with it. However, the relationship that they did end up having, as you said about what Stewart was saying, how it made her think of things differently. She did progress. She did grow as a person so much. And it was a nice relationship. But there's so much about it that I just think, I hated their wedding. I thought that was so bad. They eloped, just the two of them, to a chapel. They were pissed off at each other. I don't know about you, but if my partner told me that he had kissed someone else while we're on our way to elope, I might have had a second to think about it and then changed my mind and gone, do you know what, let's take a step back and actually just do this properly. Really work on why this happened. And then, revisit the idea of getting married rather than just going, yeah, let's just go and do this while we're pissed off at each other. Who does that?
Yeah. I'm very fascinated by your perspective. Maybe I'm looking at this through the male gaze, looking at this through Penny or through Leonard's eyes, sort of seeing man falls in love with the beautiful girl next door. But it's actually fascinating to hear your perspective on that because there would have been Penny can get any man she wants, and that would bring pressure to the relationship because obviously Leonard can't. So it's if we're talking about looks and looks alone, it's a little bit codependent. If Penny wanted to go out and get another guy, she easily could, and there's no reason at all why Penny can't get a better looking scientist. And there's other better looking scientists out there. There's other better looking, whatever, smart people, true people. And especially whenever Penny started to get her own job and her own income and her own kind of thing. So it's a case of what did Leonard bring to that relationship, and what do you think that Leonard did bring to that relationship, or do you think that sort of?
I honestly don't think he brought very much to it, to be honest. I think once they were together, the writers kind of dropped the ball on that one, and they kind of just coasted. And they do actually. They kind of talk about it in one of the episodes where they try and write the holiday card of what they did that year, and they really did nothing. You know, once she had her job and he was sort of doing his thing, they didn't do things together. They weren't really planning for their future. Nothing was happening for them. And I think that's the thing we sort of talked about earlier, how once you put that ring on, that's when the hard work happens. But they didn't. Once they put that ring on, they stopped and just coasted.
Yeah.
And I think that in itself would have been where the relationship fell apart, you know, because it wouldn't have worked. Because what would have happened is when they're not doing things together and they're going off and doing their own thing, they would have drifted. And I don't know, maybe Penny would have been the type to be swayed by somebody at work, you know.
Yeah, that's a very interesting point. I think that you've got a good perspective on that. Definitely after they got together and definitely after they got married, I kind of lost interest in them or something. Like, I loved their romance. I loved up until the point they got together. And I thought it was really sweet and stuff. And then, yeah, you're right. Working on the marriage, they didn't do, and they seemed to always be around. They seem to argue a lot about stupid things as well. Like they seem to, for some reason, these comedy writers seem to think that watching people argue is funny. It's something that I see all the time in these sitcoms. Is that, you know, if we just talk about the Big Bang Theory, Sheldon and me argue all the time. Bernadette and Howard argue all the time. And Penny and Leonard argue all the time. It's sort of, you know, I'm watching this for escapist TV. I don't want to watch you two arguing. You know, I want to watch you six people being funny. I don't want to watch two sad sacks moaning about how they can't get girls.
Yeah.
And that means, so I watched the last season of the Big Bang Theory the other day in preparation for this, and I actually really enjoyed it. And it wasn't as bad as I remembered it being. I stopped watching the Big Bang Theory a few years ago because I couldn't stand it anymore. I really thought it wasn't funny anymore. But no, I did actually watch the last couple of seasons, and it was actually not bad. So it did seem to find its mojo again, but it did seem to argue a lot over stupid kind of things.
I would agree. I think what the writers are trying to do is their way of making it real, bringing the reality to the relationships by going, well, everybody argues in everyday life, but what they're forgetting is we're watching these shows to get away from that. We want an escape. Lynn is just commenting there saying, what about Amy and Sheldon? Talking about their relationship, I actually think theirs is one of the best relationships ever, because I think they're very, very good together, and they do have a lot of the same things. But one of the things that I do want to talk about Amy, I'll also discuss about Bernadette, is the character progression from the very first episode that they're in to even the next episode really frustrates me re-watching the episodes, because Amy's a robot and Bernadette's not far behind. Now, don't get me wrong, obviously what'll have happened is once they've been in that episode, they'll have done all the reviews and all of that stuff, and people have come back and went, actually, we need this character to change a bit. That is fair enough, but part of me thinks, I don't think Bernadette was ever meant to be a lasting character. I think she was actually only supposed to be like a filler bit, and they thought, actually, this might be kind of good. But I think what they should have done is had that robotic character, because I love that episode where she went out on a date with Howard and everything he said, she didn't understand. She didn't get any of his references. I love that. But for her then to become a softer person and less robotic, I didn't buy that. I would have preferred them to bring in someone else as that person. And similar with Amy, I kind of liked her. I liked who they brought in, but she did change so much and it was quite fast. Whereas at least with Sheldon, you saw it over the seasons. It wasn't a dramatic change in who he was as a person. Yes, there's a lot of things about him that I'm like, that doesn't really tie in, but I definitely think that they could have slowed the progression of those characters, or Bernadette could have been two different, well, just hit my mic, two different people.
Yeah, Bernadette. Yes, you've got a very interesting insight into these shows. Yeah, Bernadette, I think, was meant to be just a once off, but then people liked her,
Hmm. Hmm.
so they had to give her a character then. So I think that, and for the record, I do like Bernadette, I do like Amy, and I do like how both of the characters, especially Amy, grew. Um, Bernadette kind of went in a bad way in some respects, but Amy really complimented Sheldon in a big way and really brought the best out of him in a big way, um, and stuff. So Bernadette basically moaned at Howard constantly.
Yeah, just thinking of the character progression actually just makes me think of the fact that Bernadette went from being basically a robot to being a crazy, scary, tiny dwarf of a person that everybody was terrified of. You
Uh,
know, and yes, I get where you're saying, that they liked the character and decided to keep her, but the character that they kept wasn't the character that was in that episode with her. They decided, I don't know whether they decided they wanted Melissa Roach in it. And that's why they made a lasting character or what it was. But Bernadette, who was initially to the Bernadette that she became, are like polar opposites. And I
yeah,
think they could have just.
Linda's just asked
No, go ahead.
about Howard's mother's death, and I think that after Howard's mother's death, the Bernadette character became more relevant, and they had to kind of like make her a bigger element to what it was they were trying to kind of. It was good passing of the mantle for Howard. Like Howard had to grow up then. Like Howard didn't have a choice.
Yeah.
So having Bernadette there to give him some sort of support was probably good. That was probably more or less the end of the kind of yes, she replaced Howard's mum. And
Yeah.
that was it. It was good passing of the mantle and growing up for Howard, even though he still had his immature moments. After that, he did become more of an adult after the mum passed away.
Yeah, I loved the fact that it was like Bernadette just sort of slipped into that motherly role, and even whenever Stewart and Raj were sort of there all the time, she was still that motherly person telling them what to do. And I loved that even before she did pass away, you saw how Bernadette was slowly becoming that mother, that crazy mother shouting all the time and all of that. Like I remember an episode where they were staying in his mum's house overnight and she brought up breakfast and all of a sudden she's shouting down the stairs, but it sounds identical to Hard's mum. And I love the way they do that and how he doesn't realize at first. I honestly, the episode where she's shouting and he suddenly realizes that she is just his mum all over makes me laugh every time because he's kind of like, oh crap, what have I done? But he broke her. He made her that person by being a child. She had to do that. She had to fill that role of being a mother no matter what.
Yeah, maybe that's why she kind of that character development kind of happened with Bernadette. I do like Melissa Rush, and I do see why they wanted more of her, especially in the first couple of seasons when she was very sweet, very innocent, very kind of. And I do think she brought something to the show, and I see why they wanted more of her. Yeah, I think Howard was a bad husband. Is that kind of why you think she became that
I wouldn't
character?
say bad, but I think it was definitely that dynamic of child husband where she's having to do everything. She's having to give him an allowance. She's having to tell him what to do. She's having to look after him in every way. So, not necessarily bad, but I mean, he was babied his whole life. His mum did everything for him right up until he was in his, I don't know, late 20s, early 30s. I'm not sure what age they're supposed to be. But I definitely think he's not the perfect husband, but I don't think he's bad, but he's not good either, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
He tries his best, but he just kind of fails.
Howard was kind of the first main character to kind of get a long-term relationship, really, wasn't he? Yeah, he was the first one married, which is kind of weirdly ironic considering that he was kind of a womanizing character the first season or two, but he was the first one to sort of settle down. Maybe he just needed to, maybe that kind of overbearing mother thing was something that he needed in his life.
Yeah. I'm just seeing there the comment from Lynn. What about the episode where they kind of talk about Sheldon's brain and how they make Leonard understand with the itchy jumper? I love that episode. I find it so good because it really delved into how his mind worked and how whenever things weren't right in his head, then it did feel like that itchy jumper. He felt like just ripping his skin off. And I thought it was a good way to show people, because I think it's one thing that kind of annoyed me about the Big Bang Theory, that they skirt around the whole autism thing from start to finish. They never once talk about it properly. They talk about how he's been tested, and scientists, doctors, and all of that said there was nothing wrong with him. But he's very obviously an autistic person who is doing his best to function in everyday life. And as somebody, I mean, I have family members, I have nephew, I have cousins and stuff who have Asperger's and are very high functioning. And I look at my nephew Matthew in particular and see him as kind of similar to Sheldon, and see a lot of the traits and stuff. And I kind of think, yes, they skirted around it, but they could have at least mentioned it once so that it was a definite. I also like at the same time that it wasn't a big deal, if you know what I mean. Like, they didn't focus on it all the time. And it was just, here was this main character, here was this person, and this is what he likes, and this is what way he lives. But what did annoy me is the amount of times that they fell out with him over the way he was and how they didn't understand him. I think as friends, as people who loved him, should have been able to cope with that in a better way. I think that was probably one of the things that disappointed me about that whole autism thing. But I loved the episode with the jumper because it was a good way to sort of add that in, that's how things made him think. Sorry, that's how things made him feel, rather.
An interesting question that I'm interested in discussing with you is, this is us moving on to the next topic now. Do you think that the Big Bang Theory contributed to the success of the MCU?
100%. I mean, I think as a female, now my husband has always been into all of that. So I've kind of, over these 16 years, I've been more into it because of him. But I think especially for women, a lot more are interested in those things because of watching the Big Bang Theory. And I think it's definitely, with having the comic book store and seeing all of that and then focusing a lot on it, Sheldon with all his t-shirts and things like that, I definitely think that it's contributed to the reignition of people's love for it.
Yes, well, that's a good point about sort of it being more accessible to women. There's also there's a lot of people ever since the Big Bang Theory now sort of see themselves as nerds, but probably wouldn't have seen themselves as nerds before the Big Bang Theory, and they would have been embarrassed to call themselves nerds. And definitely, the Big Bang Theory made nerd culture. You know, I was always into Star Trek. Long before the Big Bang Theory. I was into Next Gen, Voyager, Deep Space Nine, before the Big Bang Theory. I did have the toys, the Marvel toys as a kid, but I wouldn't say I was that nerdy about it and stuff. We had a couple of comic books around the house, but nothing crazy. Like, I wouldn't have been as all out as they would have been. Certainly the Star Trek references I really liked. I was always a big fan of sci-fi and stuff. Just nerdy movies like Back to the Future and all that sort of stuff. And that came into the popular zeitgeist because of the Big Bang Theory. It meant that you could start talking about it, which it was kind of like coming out of the closet or something for me. It was like, oh, I've always liked Star Trek. It's very uncool.
Nerds became attractive. I think that was one of the things that the Big Bang Theory did. Nerds became attractive. Because there was the really hot girl who fell in love with the nerd. And as he said himself, he's the king of nerds in one of the episodes. I think that was the thing that it made it okay then to be nerdy and to love all of that. Like, I mean, I could sit on a Saturday night and watch a couple of Marvel movies, and I love Star Wars and I'm okay with that. But there would have been a time that people would have looked at you and gone, you like Star Wars? You like this? But yeah, I definitely think it's helped contribute to people's love for it.
because both The Big Bang Theory and Friends had a massive effect on the culture of the time. Um,
hmm
we have sort of Rachel's haircut. We have, they were both a very, very much cultural touchstone of that era, of that whatever. To a lesser extent, How I Met Your Mother and Two and a Half Men were cultural touchstones. Yeah, but definitely Friends contributed to the culture of the 90s. That maybe it
Yeah.
just maybe it was just sort of it showed the culture of the 90s, or maybe it contributed to the
hmm
culture of the 90s. That coffee shop culture that came out in around the mid 90s, where
Yeah.
everybody was going to coffee shops and everybody was going. Starbucks became very, very successful in the mid 90s. So maybe Friends was just showing
hmm
that, or maybe Friends contributed to it. It's chicken or the egg kind of a question.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. You could be right there. Definitely think it could be something to do with things like that becoming more common, more popular because people were seeing, oh, well, here people are hanging out in coffee shops, and it might have helped. But yeah, it's amazing whenever you look at the difference in them over the years and you look back on how they were. And just you saying about Rachel's haircut, I find that one really fascinating because if you look from start to finish, how many different haircuts Rachel had? Why was it that one? What was it about that one that became a phenomenon?
uh,
Everybody had that haircut. Why
in
that one?
1994 or whatever, every woman was getting that haircut.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it was a
I'd love
sensation.
to know why it became a sensation because that, looking back on it now, because she had her really long hair, she had wavy hair, she had bobs, she had sort of mid length bobs and all of that. But that one is the one that, took the world by storm for some reason. It'd be interesting to find out why. But yeah,
Yeah.
that's my thought on that.
Comment in the comments below, sure, and let us know. Yes, Charlie Sheen was more or less resurrected by Two and a Half Men. I think that
hmm
for bringing Charlie Sheen back was good. Also, John Cryer, he was only ever in. He wasn't in the Breakfast Club. He was in one of those ones with Molly Ringwald. He was in,
Mm.
but he was basically he.
Um,
Um,
I
anyway,
can't think which one it is, but yeah. I
yeah,
think, I mean, John Cryer and Charlie Sheen were two of the highest paid actors in America at one time because of Two and a Half Men, and I hated John Cryer's character.
yeah.
But he was successful. I find that
Mhm.
amazing that they were the top two paid actors. Um, but yeah, like I would never have known who John Cryer was before. Charlie Sheen probably sticks in my head from Ferris Bueller for the most part. Um, and then Red Dawn, isn't it?
Charlie Sheen was in a lot of stuff. He was quite successful, but his
Yeah,
career
but
was a
that's gone back into the 80s when I was in nappies
uh,
still, so
yeah.
that's
No, but
before
back
my
in the day, I
time.
think Charlie Sheen was
Yeah.
successful in time, but John Cryer not so much. John Cryer was
No,
uh, basically forgotten about. Um,
yeah. And I think that's one thing. It did make him a somebody, but has he gone on to do anything since Two and a Half Men? Have you seen him? I think I seen him in one thing.
he was
And
in
if I
that.
remember correctly, he might be totally bald. Did I make that up?
He
I don't
looks a
know.
lot older. Yes.
Supergirl. He's in Supergirl, Lyndsey.
Okay. There you go.
I only
Um,
watched that for like a few episodes. It didn't become one of my loved seasons series.
no, I watched it for a few episodes with one of the girls I was seeing a few years ago, and it was fine. There wasn't anything wrong with it. It wasn't a bad show in any stretch of the imagination. It was fine. It was a
Mhm.
very kind of middle of the road show. Um,
Yeah.
it was sort of one of those ones. Do I really want to waste my time watching this, or do I want to watch something good? You know, that was my overwhelming opinion. So I wouldn't say it was bad. It wasn't bad. She was, she seemed like a nice actress and a very pretty girl and whatnot. But
Yeah.
it was very meh. It was just very.
Yeah. I would
Um,
agree.
So thanks very much for watching, everybody that was watching, mostly Lynn. Make sure to press the subscribe button below and tune in at a later stage. Press the bell icon to be notified of future content. Thank you very much.
And give it a thumbs up too. Don't forget to do that. It's very important. See you next time. Bye.